Good morning.
Hey, George.
Good morning.
All righty, it's right at 9 o'clock. We're having a special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners to discuss a letter. But before we do that, wanted to open the meeting with opportunity for public comment. And I do see we have at least one attendee. So if you joined us this morning to make a public comment, please just raise your hand and Beth will move you over and we can hear what you have to say. All right, looks like we don't have any public comment today, so we'll close public comments. And I'm going to turn this over to Peter, but I'll give a tiny bit of context. Last Tuesday, we had a conversation with a group of citizens and representatives from the rec district and from the school district who were interested in making a grant application to fund an employer-based childcare facility located in one of the school district properties. And part of the discussion was an ask of the county to provide a non-binding letter indicating our potential support, financial support, to the tune of, I think, $100,000. And so there's some time urgency associated with that request, which is why we didn't wait until next Tuesday at our next regularly scheduled meeting. And Peter has drafted a letter which he has distributed to us. Peter, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, that actually was a pretty good synopsis right there. I did send the letter to each board member. I did hear back from Commissioner Wheelock, who was supportive of the letter, subject to the discussion that we needed to have today. I also had a conversation with Commissioner Marlin concerning this as well. The letter that I prepared, and I can share the screen so the public can also see it if that's okay. Let me pull it up right now.
Peter, while you're pulling it up, you all might have seen that at 8:57, I sent some suggested edits. I will acknowledge that the timing is unfortunate.
I did not see that. Can you see the letter at this point?
I can.
Okay, so I did not see the suggested edits, and I don't want to open my screen, my Outlook, to open it up because I think that might confuse it. But maybe George, since you did send some edits, if you want to offer some context, maybe that'll make sense. I just want to let everybody know the letter that's in front of us was essentially a letter that I had prepared based on what the board had directed in terms of some unanswered questions that the board still had concerning the presentation that was given on Tuesday. Since then, of course, this letter itself may not be the type of letter that we want the grant applicants to necessarily use. They may want something that's more defined. So I'm going to throw it to George, if that's okay, Sean, and go from there.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess one thing maybe we need to clarify coming out of the gate is I had understood that this is a letter to our partners establishing that we are willing to write a letter of support for the grant, and that this is not, I don't, if this was a letter intended to be a letter of support for a grant, I think we would probably all find it lacking. And so I see nods. Are we on the same page on that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know that I am smart enough to answer that question. I think the person who would probably be able to answer the question is the group that's making the grant application. I mean, my own personal thought is that we should provide a letter that gives us the flexibility to be able to act in the public's best interest, no matter what happens in the future. And that, to me, would make an argument for a letter that was not very strong.
In terms of the support that it was lending, but more cautioned?
Well, that it's indicating the potential for support rather than a hard commitment that we would find difficult to unwind if circumstances played out differently than everyone is hoping.
So in the letter that's before you, I basically address the presentation that was brought to us. And then, and this is to the CCMRD as well as the school district is where the letter is addressed. And it basically sets forth that we, in theory, are committed to, certainly are committed to childcare, early childcare in Clear Creek County, that we want to support that, and that we are willing to basically affirm our participation in this, and tacitly say that we would consider committing funds at some point in order to support this endeavor. But that all of this would be conditioned on a number of questions that we have being answered, and I outline those questions in the letter as well, where I basically list out what it is that we are looking for, including some real specifics as to the financial and operational obligations, what each participant gets in exchange for what they contribute. And so that's it. The way this letter is presented is it's basically to the other partners, potential partners, saying, this is what we need. Where are you on this? And it's not directed to the group that really did that is the nonprofit that's out there that is promoting early childcare. And I talked to George a little yesterday about that, because I was a little confused, and I'm not sure if the public is as well, as to who's bringing this. The presentation that we had on Tuesday had the rec district there, but it also had members of the not-for-profit there speaking. And so the lines were a little blurred, and I wasn't completely clear as to what we were looking at. In my discussions with George, and he can elaborate, I almost got the impression maybe it's a two-track type of situation where this not-for-profit that exists out there would be supportive of an effort among the three governmental entities. So I leave it back to you for discussion.
Yeah, I'll just add, I asked a representative of the volunteers, who do they want the letter to be sent to? And the answer I got was to the superintendent of the school district, with copies to the board presidents of the school district and the rec district. So I think we're all on the same page there.
Yeah. So Peter, I think you characterized it well. Really what we have is a group that doesn't have formal status, that is made up of staffs of the rec district, the school district, and the county, that have kind of put this together. And so I think the response is appropriately to the other people who would participate in the grant. One thing that I want to add, this wasn't in my written comments, the questions that we have, Peter, I think you articulated them well. One question that I heard,
and George, I unshared the screen in case you wanted to share your version. Okay. You're more than welcome to.
Okay, thank you. One question I heard that I think is worth articulating in this letter, we got a general answer, and I would like to see at some point a more specific answer to how private employers can gain access into this system once it's up and running. Sean, I know you asked the question, and it's a really good one.
Or even private citizens, right? Outside of the context of an employer.
That's the question that I heard, was it, and it was one that I know I put out there, was how can county residents and county businesses who are not part of this consortium take advantage of this, and do we have a business plan that builds the capacity to be able to do so?
Yeah, I think that's between the three of us, that's a fair characterization of where we're at. And I mentioned private employers sort of within the context that those employees are our residents, right? So I'm going to go ahead and share this screen and just show my edits basically amount to some sentences I'd like to add and just some cleanups. The general thrust of these edits is that if this board does support this effort and the need to expand early childcare, we might want to say so more directly. And so I'm trying to do this in this sentence here. I am not married to any of these words. I also hesitate to try to co-write here, and would be happy to just say, have Peter write something that matches this intent, or however you all want to handle it.
And I figured that this is a good forum to go through the general ideas, some language, but that ultimately the direction that we would be seeking from staff, from the board to staff, would be for us to finalize a letter consistent with the views of the board, and then present that to you for your signatures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And I think what I've seen so far, it looks fine to me. I mean,
Okay.
again, the key thing in my mind is there are too many unknowns right now for us to put something down on paper that's going to hold us to an actual fiduciary commitment, financial
Right.
commitment.
Right. I kind of agree with that. These questions need to be answered in order for us to be able to do that. And I'm trying to think of a better way, as I keep hearing the words said and the words read here, of expressing what I did a moment ago. And I think we're on the same page. I think it's just a matter of choices of words. That since 70% of the people roughly in this county who work outside this county, by definition, they would be working for other private employers, both they would be working for private employers outside the county or employers other than those resident within the county. And so we're saying it's for Clear Creek County residents to be able to use. And I would further state that as an example, if someone needed childcare because they were out looking for a job or having to do their daily things that may involve any number of items, we just want to know that the childcare slots that we have capacity for that, and it's not limited to. It's an asset of the people, not just an asset of employers.
And I don't think I've heard anything. I think, and I saw Mitch chimed in on the chat to indicate that the reason why this was associated with government and nonprofits is because that allows for a much more modest match requirement. And I don't think that I've heard anything to suggest that the facility would be limited in who it could serve, or that anybody had a strong feeling about that other than what we've expressed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and I appreciate the details, Mitch. And what I think I'm hearing and what I share with my colleagues is that we just want to know the details of how it works, how it will work. So, okay, so let me describe these sentences, kind of what's the intent behind these sentences. I think if our intention is to get these answers before the grant is submitted, we might want to rethink our path. I just don't know that they'll be able to get all that detail. And so in my mind, I'm ready to write a letter of support for this grant that is not binding, but that is enthusiastic. And kind of with the understanding that we've got a lot of details to work out in the interim, and confidence that we can get there. I don't see any of these details based on the general answers to our questions as really having a lot of potential to threaten the project.
Yeah,
So
I agree with that.
I'm sorry, do you foresee 2 letters then?
In my mind, we would ask a letter of support to be different than this. We would ask that the letter of support achieve a shared goal of this board of not binding us, but that it, be enthusiastic about what we're trying to accomplish here. If we accomplish this together, it will be good for this community, and we should be enthusiastic about that.
I agree with that.
Do we have any feedback from the group of volunteers and the other potential partners in terms of whether this is adequate or not? Because I mean, in some ways, maybe we're making this more complicated if this is already good enough.
I haven't heard that feedback now. I guess I would say we should have our ears open for that feedback and, you know, have the intent to write a letter, like you said, that they think is helpful.
Well, I'm not clear on the direction that the board is giving, unfortunately, and maybe I'm missing it. I see the letter that's before us with those questions, which is not the letter that we apparently want to provide to. Again, I'm not sure who we're providing this letter of support to, who that will be addressed to. The same people that Sean had mentioned, which is whom this letter is addressed to, or which are our potential partners, or is who is submitting the grant application? Because it seems to me that that's who the support letter would be addressed to. And the support letter could be as simple as, we've listened to your goals as expressed during your presentation. We firmly believe childcare is very important in Clear Creek County and want to endeavor to partner with entities in the county to provide it. And you have our commitment to continue to examine and explore those opportunities, something like that. And it can be very mild without going into anything more specific if that's sufficient. And then you can still send this letter if you want as a separate matter. I'm not clear which the board is looking for and at which stage. Perhaps this is premature.
I
Well-
think I understand what Peter's saying, which is it's difficult to craft a letter that both details all the questions we need answered and expresses enthusiasm. It's hard to put those two together in a box. So a letter separately to the group stating the things that we really need worked out, memorializing that, as well as another letter that's more general, because the list of caveats might imply lack of enthusiasm and might also look like a lot of hurdles that would degrade the value of the application. Is that correct?
I think we're at a big disadvantage now that we don't have anybody from the volunteer group as part of this conversation. And I see Cameron and Mitch are in the attendee list, and if they're interested in weighing in, I think that would be appropriate. The thing I'm kind of wondering to myself is if it might not make sense to give staff direction to work directly with representatives from that group and from the other potential partners, the school district and the rec district, to essentially answer the questions that we've raised right now, which I don't think we're going to be able to answer based on our own knowledge of what's going on, and then potentially bring this back on Tuesday in a form that we could approve.
I mean, I view this as kind of simple. We have our partners' boards also have decision points in front of them. Them knowing our minds will help them make a good decision for their organizations and for the goal that we share. That's my intent in asking for this letter, is that it goes out today in time for those boards to know our minds before they make their decisions. And I think that we can find a way to say both. We think that this project can be very good for this community, and there's some details that we want to ask about it. I think we can figure out how to do that.
So I can take that, what you've said, and that's easy to basically formulate in there, and then talk about questions and basically the questions that are outlined, but perhaps put it in less of a conditional way of framing it, and instead put it more in terms of, these are things that we will explore as part of our partnership to try and secure this goal. That may soften the conditional nature of it without getting too much into specifics. I think I can do that.
Oh, I just realized you're looking at my screen, so my apologies. I'm not trying to write this letter for you. Could we make this clear with just a simple sentence at the end that says, we're prepared to write a letter of support if all three organizations do indeed decide to apply for this grant? I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to say, right?
Right.
Beth, would you mind elevating Mitch to the panelists? I think he might have a couple of things to add to this conversation.
Yeah, I was gonna ask too, is there any way that we could share a draft with Becky and Ula Karen that are writing the grant and just make sure it says what they need for their grant? And try and answer some of the questions at the same time. So, and I did cross Mitch over.
And I think that that's a good idea, Beth, in terms of it's allowable. This is now public. We're discussing this draft in open, so I'm not really concerned about any issues that in that regard as far as it being just a draft document. And based on what the board is saying, we could work with those partners to try and craft it so it works for them as well. I do want to say one thing before Mitch speaks, and I'm very glad that he's here to speak to this, but Mitch has pointed out that many of these details will be worked out in an MOU. So ultimately, whatever the form of the agreement, whether it's an intergovernmental agreement, which is more likely the form it will take rather than an MOU, I guess my thought would be is that we still have to, before we get to that point, we kind of have to work some of these things out for the board to actually give more formal commitments to the project. And then ultimately, any IGA would end up including these details. Now, if the not-for-profit and these participants are looking for an MOU to collaborate on producing something without ever committing any money or anything of that nature at this point, we can certainly do an MOU, but that can also be just an informal agreement that we're all going to collaborate to try and put something together. So I just wanted to state that before Mitch spoke, and of course he's here now.
Yeah, thank you. And just to respond really quickly, Beth, I think, yes, we would want feedback on a letter of support. And I think what we're discussing is something different. We're discussing just a communication to our partners, as I understand it.
Right.
Yeah, and then Mitch mentioned in the chat some specifics about $100,000 being spent in a particular way. And my own personal thoughts about that are, if we're talking about committing $100,000, $100,000 is $100,000. If that's our end of the financial commitment, I guess I don't have strong feelings about how we characterize it being spent, because the whole project is going to cost a lot of money, a lot more than $100,000. And if the volunteer group and the other partners believe that's the most effective way to secure a grant, then I'm pretty neutral on what type of language we might put in there about how our contribution gets spent.
Sean, does that capture what you were trying to say? Just that addition?
Yep.
That we add the dollars?
Yeah. I mean, I would, now that Mitch has joined us, I guess I would invite him to validate that assumption.
Yeah, good point.
All right, Mitch.
Happy to answer any questions. You know, if I don't see the board could characterize it as operational support without diving into whether or not it's specifically associated with a person. If personnel expenses are something that the board and your staff tries to avoid talking about, or adding people when other groups are having challenges within the county organization.
I like the idea of keeping it general and calling it operational support, just because that also would give the partnership the most flexibility going forward too.
I think that this group, the volunteer group as they've been described, would be open to either a 1 or a 2 letter format. You know, one might consider listing the things that the county would expect to see addressed in an intergovernmental agreement.
Is that something, Mitch, you think would not be part of the grant application, just be part of a public record?
I think it can go either way. You know, making sure your employer partners see it, as well as the volunteer coordinators or the volunteer group see what the expectations are, I think is important. I don't believe there'll be surprises to them, but let's not find out in 6 months that the sides aren't seeing the same vision.
And Mitch, do you think it would be a problem to have some back some private conversations between county staff and the other partners to get on the same page before Tuesday, and then have this board approve whatever letters are needed on Tuesday rather than trying to get it figured out today?
I think doing it well the first time is more important than trying to rush through it and then keep changing it.
Yeah.
If someone from either the staff or a commissioner were to reach out to, say, the presidents of the other boards that are contemplating participation and share their thoughts as to where the county might go if there's another meeting to approve something, that might help move them along.
I like that approach. George, Randy, what do you guys think?
Hey, I'm struggling to understand how this letter, as it's written, is problematic. Mitch, you said we should do it well first, and I agree. And so can you help me understand what's in this letter that is not well? And I'm not like taking this as
So
personally.
You're looking for constructive criticism.
Yeah,
Sure.
I just want to
I've-
understand. It seems like we could just
for
send this
the-
letter and it would be helpful.
Since George put the letter up, I can see about 4 or 5 paragraphs at a time. So, I really haven't had a chance to digest the letter.
Okay. Maybe Sean, then you seem to be worried that this letter is going to be in some way harmful. Can you articulate?
I don't think it's harmful. I think Mitch really hit it on the head, which is, I appreciate the work that you did, but you did provide it to this board 3 minutes before our public meeting started today. And it has a feeling of rushing through this, and I don't sense the need to rush through it. So if we do nothing more than to have our attorney rationalize all the suggestions and red lines in here, and put his legal thinking cap on too, I think that would be time well spent. And I don't understand that there's any time urgency between now and Tuesday. So for me, that says there's no advantage to trying to wrap this up today, that we would only have a better product if we invite our partners to collaborate and speak into this, and have our staff understanding what they know about our intent and what we were trying to accomplish, come up with something on Tuesday that might be more effective in terms of securing the grant dollars.
Are you thinking that this letter is intended to persuade the grantor, or are you thinking that this letter is intended to communicate to our partners?
I would think all of the above. I mean, from what I heard from Mitch, and I'll invite him to comment on this too, is I thought this letter was something to be sent to our potential partners that they would in turn use as part of the grant application to indicate the county's level of interest and commitment.
And what are you thinking of it as, George?
Yeah, that's the misunderstanding or miscommunication that we're having. My intent in asking for this letter to go out was that we communicate to our partners that we're interested in a letter of support if they're willing to move forward as well. And that on Tuesday, we're hearing back from our partners and we're discussing a letter of support. So a second letter goes out assuming if all of our partners agree and we're all at the table, then we write a letter of support. And so that's why when you make statements like you want to hear our partners speak into this letter, it's a little confusing for me because this is a communication to our partners.
Yeah. And I didn't know that a second letter was being contemplated or necessary. Again, maybe I could ask Mitch for him to weigh on this. I thought this was the only thing that we were going to be required to do in order to indicate our interest in participating and getting the grant money.
So this is a letter indicating the conditions that we would hope to see resolved in order to be able to move forward with a strong letter of support, which could be approved on Tuesday. Is that right, George?
Yes, and approved on Tuesday or at whichever time is, we have everything we need for that. Because Sean, you're right, it's entirely premature to write a letter of support to this grant.
Yeah, well, let me ask Mitch. Mitch, I'm confused about what's being asked of us. I thought I knew the answer, which I just expressed, and maybe I'm completely wrong. Mitch, what is your understanding of what is being required of us? Is it one letter or two letters?
I don't believe there's a requirement for 2 letters. I was expecting a single letter that addressed the desire to fund operational support to the tune of $100,000 and the willingness to enter into an intergovernment agreement at a time in the future.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
I-
If that's
I
true,
am- I'm good with whatever path that the Board of County Commissioners takes or directs their staff to take.
Yeah.
And
And so this letter is the letter that's in front of us that I asked for when we were in that executive session, was a request from me. This is not a request from someone to receive this letter. This is a request from me that we communicate as an organization to our partners that we want to move forward. We want to write a letter of intent, and so that's my intent, is to put some wind in the sails of the organizations who are trying to decide if they can do this in time, as well as the staff in those organizations that's got a big challenge in getting a grant written in time. That's my intent.
And
Yeah,
I think
but I mean,
I think that's very polite, because I think they need a kick in the ass, not wind in their sails.
well, thanks, Mitch.
Makes me wonder what you might say about us.
Yeah, listening to this conversation, we could, and I'm not really knocking any one person. It's just a confusing conversation a little bit, and I think therefore it's important to put wind in their sails and also inform them to be able to show us something in return quickly, so that we can then feel comfortable with whatever letter we're sending on Tuesday and have it be the right letter. Obviously, today is Wednesday, so this memorialization of our conversation that we had about what the goals of the county commissioners would be within this context is important to be in their hands, so that we can come to agreement and write that letter in a way that's the most helpful to them.
yeah, one thing that's confusing to me, maybe it's just a coincidence, but I thought that the grant writers requested the letter, that it wasn't your personal interest, George, but this whole conversation is confusing. And I think some of it is a reflection of the maturity level of the group that we have here together, right? And we all want it to be successful. We have a short timeline. But I think with all that said, if what we really need is one letter, and this thing that we have in front of us is close to being what we need, and we have almost a week before our meeting on next Tuesday, I feel like we could probably give our staff the direction to meet with the school district and the rec district and validate those assumptions and come up with something on Tuesday that we could maybe make a couple of changes to and be finished with this.
Yeah, I think this is, I think for our potential partners to be able to respond to what we put down here and do the same thing George has done, which is kind of take an edit at it and say, well, this would work better for our purposes if it said this, and then let our staff work with them to massage something that is that allows us wiggle room to understand. I mean, we can be committed to it, but it allows us the room to continue to negotiate the details later on. And if we can't get close to that, obviously we can't make a hard financial commitment in our letter for the grant application. So maybe we can even resolve those kinds of issues. But I think if we get this letter out to them today, like you said, George, and get a response back and let them look at it and work with staff, we can be good.
And if it's non-binding, I'm personally not going to have a lot of interest in nitpicking and over editing this thing, right? I mean, it sounds like we need to get something out there to get some energy and momentum to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm not married to any of these words. And Sean, you said something earlier that I agree with wholeheartedly, which is that we can let Peter write these words. And so what I'm trying to do is just sort of craft some concepts. Maybe I can just send this to Peter. The direction can be for him to make sure this letter doesn't compromise us in any way and get it out with the intent that it expresses right now.
And I'll just say that I have full trust in George. If, we say meeting adjourned in a little bit, and this document is sitting here and Peter has access to it. I'm fully okay with you continuing to talk with Peter and help with that effort too, to get the words massaged into what works best. Not just like let Peter run with this doc and that's the end of the conversation, but I think I would welcome George working with Peter to make sure that Peter understands what all these words were intended to mean.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it should reflect that we're very enthusiastic about the potential for this to be a great solution for our community. But the truth is, there's just a lot of unanswered questions that would prevent us from making a hard financial commitment at this time.
Yeah. Yes. Either a but or an and. Both of those statements can be true at the same time.
I don't think from the snippets I've been able to read on the screen that there's anything here that is contrary to what the volunteers of the employer groups have been working on. I would share one observation. The last sentence of the first paragraph, perhaps it could be a little bit more flexible as opposed to speaking of two specific funding sources. Maybe there could be some weasel words in there that allow it to broaden in case there's another opportunity that comes up.
Right.
Eventually there's going to be infrastructure money someone might be able to chase.
So your point is there might be more than 3 partners by the time this.
Oh, my point is we might want funding from more than the state of Colorado and the Buell Foundation.
Yeah, at the very top.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I was looking, I
I
thought you
can
were talking
adjust
about
that.
the one that was on screen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just a thought, by no means a letter killer.
Right. Thank you.
And Sean, could you just confirm again with me and with Mitch on the phone or on the Zoom call? Who exactly should we be addressing it to?
I'll let Mitch answer that question.
Okay, because I have it kind of superintendent board and then the board of CCMRD, so,
I think that fits the requirements.
okay. I'll get with Beth to make sure we have the proper names up there and everything, the way it should be, how we normally address it to the board and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay,
Never mind. Sorry. My instincts is.
so if I understand it, I have direction from the board to take what you see up on screen right now, work with the language to finalize it. What I will likely do is send out the draft then to, I'll give it to Beth. She can get it to the other partners for the not-for-profit. We'll get it to Mitch as well. Just get some last minute input, hopefully by tomorrow morning or something like that. And then we can finalize it and the board can sign it. Each member of the board would be signing it.
I think that sounds right.
Okay. Whenever it's determined that it's final, staff has my permission to sign for me.
Do we need to take a formal vote on that? I mean, I'm fine if we don't. I'm looking to Peter for that.
No, you don't need a motion for that or approval. I have direction and that's all that's needed.
Okay, I agree with that then. Yeah, I'm fine to put my name on it as well.
It's Mitch again. Can someone in the group figure out if there'll be an informal communication with the other employers so that we can motivate their boards to move forward in advance of you meeting next Tuesday?
I thought Peter mentioned he was going to have the draft letter sent to that exact group.
I was going to send the letter to Ula and Lori Beckel. I was going to pass it along to Mitch. I was not sending it to CCMRD or CCSD because that's who the letter's going to ultimately. I think what Mitch is asking is it possible for board members to reach out to their counterparts at the school district or CCMRD and just mention that this letter is coming, and is it something that they could pay attention to and respond to in a fairly timely manner? Mitch, did I paraphrase that well?
Yes.
Okay.
You did it nicely, protecting all of your members.
I'm happy to continue to communicate with our partners in this. I have been doing so to date. With the caveat that, of course, I can't represent Clear Creek County. And if maybe the letter could even say, if they want to understand more about the county's position or the board's position, they could talk to Peter or Brian. Peter and Brian can try to figure out how to communicate what is consensus and what may not be consensus.
Thank you.
Perfect. George, Randy, do you have anything else to add? Or Peter, Brian, do we have anything else to cover, or are we done?
No, I think I've sufficiently confused the conversation to this point, so I'm happy to let
me
it go.
too. Thank you all for your time and your patience.
And Peter, do we have an executive session to follow today?
We do not. I can announce one if you want one on the subject matter. We just haven't, you're allowed to have an executive session without 24 hours notice.
Yeah, I don't know that I feel the need for one. George, Randy, what do you guys think?
No, I've got a little problem with my Outlook right now. I had to come in from the outside to get into this meeting, and I'm trying to, I think somebody must have been on Outlook in another form last night, and my username and password disappeared, so I can't even access. You could send me the Zoom link, Peter, that would be great, but you'd have to send it to my private email address for me to even
Right.
get it. So I'm
Okay.
paralyzed as of right now.
Well, I think that means we're done. So Mitch, thank you very much for joining us and for being a representative of the group. And Cameron, thanks for joining us as well. I believe our meeting is adjourned, and we'll see everyone on Tuesday.
Randy, I'll call you.
Okay, thanks.